The novel, it has been said that the film The Exorcist has taken the more exploitive elements of the novel and left out maybe some of the meatier aspects. Do you want to comment on that?
Sure. Who said that? First, let's talk about who said it.
Okay, it has been said in some reviews.
By who?
Film critics.
Which one?
Okay, I don't have specifics with me, but that has been said.
I've never heard that. Let's put it that way. My attitude about the book was it was a great classic work of literature. I believe that The Exorcist will be, the novel, will be regarded years from now as the works of Edgar Allan Poe are regarded today.
Hey, where'd this come from?
I found it.
Well, let's both play.
You really don't want me to play?
Captain Howdy said no.
Who's Captain Howdy?
You're gonna die up there.
I need reassignment.
You're the best we've got.
I think I've lost my faith.
Is there someone inside you?
Sometimes.
Who is it?
I don't know.
Is it Captain Howdy? You ever heard of exorcism?
How do you go about getting an exorcism?
I beg your pardon? I'm Damien Karras. I'd like to help you. Where's Reagan? In here with us.
I believe we should begin. Avoid conversations with the demon. The demon is a liar. He will mix lies with the truth.
Why, Jimmy?
To attack us. Do not listen.
That thing isn't my daughter.
It is he who commands you. The power of Christ compels you.
What an excellent day for an exorcism.
Hello and welcome back to Book versus Movie. This is a podcast where we read books that have been adapted into films, and then we watch the movie and we try to decide which we like better, the book or the movie. I am Margot P. of the Chingona Homesteader, and on the line I have my good friend and co-host, Margot D. of Brooklyn Fit Chick.
Hi, everyone.
So we have a very special holiday edition of a Book versus Movie today. What's more Christmassy than The Exorcist?
I want to thank Patrick from F This Movie. He had me on this week, and we talked about Love, Actually, which actually is which is a holiday film-ish.
Which is a Christmas movie.
It is. And I told him we were covering this, and he cracked up. Yeah. I was just going to say, yes, I was asked you before the show because you're not into the horror stuff and the scary stuff. So I said to you, are you freaked out because you've just seen this movie recently for the first time in a long time? And you said, yeah.
Meh. I know, it's so funny. And it's true. I really don't like scary movies, especially. And also I don't like scary books. Like certainly anything like Saw, any of the Saw movies, I'm not going to go see.
Right.
Things of that nature I am really not into, but I have to say neither the book nor the movie scared me in the least. I can only think it's because of my Catholic upbringing that I was like, oh yeah, well yeah, sure, you call The Exorcist, that's what you do in a case like this. Of course that's what you do. This book, the movie came out the year I was born.
Oh wow.
And the book came out a little bit before that. So but let's talk about the book, because I had never read this book before.
No.
By William Peter Blatty, who also wrote the screenplay, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But so what did you think of the book?
I really enjoyed the book. So I don't know about you. I got the 40th anniversary edition, and I did a little research about William Peter Blatty, and he updated the book for the 40th anniversary edition versus the older versions. He didn't like the way the older versions really turned out and felt like he improved upon it. We should say William Peter Blatty was born 1928, and he actually passed away this year, 2017, in January.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he worked on this story for 10 years. In 1961, he won $10,000 on a quiz show, You Bet Your Life. And with that
That's
money,
the Groucho Marx one, isn't it?
yes, exactly. And 10 grand back then was a lot. That'd be like 100 grand today. It was a lot of money. So he was able to like bankroll himself to be a writer. And he's from the East Coast originally, from New York City. I believe he went to Georgetown, which is featured heavily in the movie. And there was a story about a kid in 1949 where there was an exorcism of a 14-year-old boy, and that took place in D.C. and St. Louis. So it started off in D.C., and then he went to relatives in St. Louis. And there was press around it at the time. His name wasn't released publicly. Now we live in an age where we have Reddit, and you can find out who it is very easily, who it supposedly is. But he apparently was cured by this. It's very controversial, this whole practice, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
You know, was he?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Like, was he actually psychologically disturbed? What was actually going on there? But apparently, to the family, they said this is what worked. And William Peter Blatty was a good Catholic boy at the time and was completely kind of freaked out about the story. So he worked on The Exorcist for about 10 years. He wrote some scripts and some comic novels and things like that, but this was the thing he really was banking on. And boy, did he bank on it. It was released in 1971. It sold 13 million copies. So he was basically set for life after that. And like you said, he also wrote the screenplay. And so this is a long answer. I didn't answer your question. I did enjoy reading the book. So what did you think of the book?
I also really liked the book. I was very impressed. I had seen the movie. Hadn't seen it in a really long time, but I had seen the movie. Because of course he wrote the screenplay as well. And we will get to this. The movie is a pretty truthful and pretty close adaptation to the book. And the book, I thought, was extremely well written. I really liked, just like in the movie, and I always wondered, I like it better in the book than it is in the movie, actually. But I always wondered about in the movie the opening scenes in Iraq with Father Merrin, because it's such an open-ended thing for most of the movie. You're like, okay, why were we in Iraq? Like, what was that about? And the same, and that's true in the book as well. But it's an interesting device because, he didn't have to do that. So just like in the movie, the book opens in, I'm trying to remember, are they actually in Iraq in the?
Yes.
I wanted to say, I thought it was Afghanistan, but maybe it's Iraq. But you get a little bit more background, like you're seeing it kind of from Father Merrin's point of view on this archaeological dig, and somebody brings him an artifact that represents a particular demon. He seems to know the name of it. He has some kind of flashback memories about this demon, and then all of a sudden we're in Georgetown.
Exactly. And it's
with the movie star.
Yeah, but they discover a small statue, which they show in the movie, but in the book they really talk about it much more. And the demon is Pazuzu. And that they've unleashed this, and then the series of omens happen after this happens. Like once they find this, which, like you said, they make it very clear in the book. In the movie, it's all that very loud, that weird music with a reverb kind of thing, and you get like this must be important for some reason, but yeah. So they tell it much more clearly in the book, and also I think Sharon, the assistant, she has a bigger role in the book. There's quite a beauty. Everything's there. I mean, if you love the movie, reading the book is just going to make it even better, I think.
I think so too. I definitely didn't feel like I said, it was well written. It's a good book, and it's a pretty fast read. But yeah, so you go from the Middle East to this little quiet house in Georgetown where there's a movie actress. You get the impression that she's a fairly well-known movie actress, and she's there in D.C. Filming a movie, and she's brought her daughter with her.
And she's also, and I don't think they ever bring this up in the movie, in the book, she's also off to direct her first film after this. and they make a big deal about how that she's really excited. It's a big thing. She's a woman. They're giving her a chance to direct a project, and then all hell breaks loose. And she doesn't get to do that eventually. But you get much more backstory about her and Reagan and the relationship with the ex-husband that's not very good, and the people living in the house with her, her staff that's helping her at the house. Like, everybody gets much more of a backstory.
Absolutely, yeah. And but it is. I thought that the movie did a really great job of evoking, like maybe because I saw the movie before, but in my mind I felt like that's the house, those are the people. Like, I really felt he does a really good job of creating that world. At 1970, we're talking 1971. So he probably he said 10 years. So he wrote it from 1961 to 1971 and we talked about this. This is very similar, I thought, in many ways to, this is going way back for us, to when we did Carrie.
Ooh, okay. One of our first books.
One of our very first books. And remember when we read Carrie, like a lot of the book Carrie, not the movie, but the book, was affected by advances in science that were going on at the time. So this is, people are going to outer space, just all kinds of stuff was happening in science. And it was a time where it sort of seemed like anything was possible. So there's a lot of the book, and it's not so much in the movie, but there's a lot of the book, describing possession and what it looks like, and but also, just like in the movie, there's most of the book is Chris, the mom, trying to find somebody who can help her with her daughter. And what I like about it is she goes through the process like you would. You call a doctor, and then the doctor's like, okay, you need this other kind of doctor. And they're like, okay, no, you need another kind of doctor. And we're going to run some tests. No, we need to bring in a psychiatrist. Okay, let's bring in this kind of psychiatrist and that kind of psychiatrist. And she exhausts every other possibility before. It's not like her daughter's acting weird at a party and she's like, oh, better call an exorcist. It's very entertaining that way, I thought. Yeah. But it is bringing in, I think it is, I think there was a lot of, just like with Carrie the book, when we were talking about the book, there's so much of this book, Carrie, that is devoted to the phenomenon of telekinesis and like all these case studies and crap that comes in the book that you're like, oh, that we all know now is total BS. But at the time it was like, well, maybe this is real. So I think there's some of that going on in The Exorcist.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's the supernatural was like on people's minds, and, what was possible and what isn't possible, and, young people going crazy. I mean, it's not, totally out of line that it takes place at this time when kids are protesting and colleges are going crazy. It doesn't, it makes sense that you would have this story about a 12-year-old girl. And that's what he changed it from a 14-year-old boy to a 12-year-old girl. But I liked the book very much describing her degeneration. Like, it was a very gradual thing, too.
Yes, yes. It just starts out of her saying uncharacteristic things here and there, or saying she doesn't feel well, kind of thing. Yeah.
Right. And then gradually it's like she's growling and she's like hard to take out in public, and then you can't take her anywhere, and people coming over, you have to like limit that as well. So yeah, it was really well put together how she degenerated into this thing, and like to the point where she's like, of course I'm going to try an exorcist. I've tried literally every single other thing. Nothing else seems to make sense. And I might as well go for it because I have tried every single other thing. And she's an atheist.
And she's an atheist. And one of the things I think is really cool, and this is in the book and in the movie, that the Father Karras, who is the first priest that she has, actually, she's friends with a Catholic priest who is this kind of, in the book and in the movie, he's just this kind of, I don't know, he's sort of like this showbiz priest.
Yes.
It's so funny. He entertains at parties and stuff. But anyway, so he puts her in touch with Father Karras, who is a priest, but who's also a psychiatrist. He's a psychiatrist for priests. He is basically their in-house shrink. When priests are conflicted about stuff, like, oh, I can't imagine what they could possibly be conflicted about. Oh gosh, knowing what we know now, which was what I was thinking watching the movie.
Yeah.
But anyway, so he's their shrink, and so because he's not only a priest but he's a shrink, he is totally completely 100% skeptical that this girl is possessed at first.
And then he meets her.
And then he's like, oh gosh, I don't know what to think now. Even then, he's not like, she's definitely possessed. Let's exorcise. He goes to his higher ups and says, look, this is what I saw. And they're like, yeah, sounds like you need an exorcist. Let's get you one.
And they get the expert.
And they get the expert.
And he's an older gentleman. He's had heart problems before. And he's the person that says, like, okay, and in the book, by the way, and as it did in real life, it takes several days, this exorcism. Like, it's day after day.
Yes.
It's exhausting. It
is exhausting. And the original case that the book is based on of the boy, was it in the 40s or the 50s?
1949.
1949. The original case of the boy, I think they said the exorcism took like 6 weeks.
Yeah.
It was, which I cannot imagine.
It was brutal.
Wow.
Yeah, they had to take him out of school, and sometimes he was in the hospital, and then sometimes he was in a mental hospital. And then he would go home for a couple of days, and then they'd have to bring him out again to a hospital because the exorcism was so brutally taxing on the body for everyone involved. Like, they needed medical experts at their disposal right away. Like, it's not in the house. You know, they were actually out in a public,
right.
in a professional space doing this in real life.
Yeah.
And in the book.
In real life.
In the book.
But
yeah.
in the book, it's a contemporary story. It's set in the late 60s, and they're doing this in the house. But yeah, so and I like that they set up your expectations. Like, listen, this could take a really long time. And Father Marin, who we learn, we learn that you have to have, it's a very particular kind of a priest, and there's almost none of them that can do an exorcism. And we learned that in the past he's done them and they've gone on for months and months, and they nearly killed him. And that's why his health isn't so great. And there he is. So they have to bring him in. But they allow Father Karras, like the psychiatrist, to assist. And he's sort of skeptical through the entire process, which is very interesting.
Yeah.
For the reader.
Yeah. He's a rational man. He looks at things that way, and so it's very hard for him to think of this supernatural, that the girl is turning into a demon, and also especially that the girl's being possessed by the devil, not just anybody, but the devil. So yeah,
right.
He's constantly, because he's a psychiatrist too. Like, he has to think about that. Is she actually mentally ill? Is she making this up? What's going on? So yeah, that the whole time, yeah, you're right. Like, for the most part, he's very skeptical. But he participates because he wants to help.
Yeah. One of the things I liked in the book that is not in the movie is in the movie you and I get it, it's actually, and I think it might be scarier in the movie than in the book, but at one point the director of the movie that Chris is there to film dies.
Yes, Burke
Denning or something like that. And in the movie, you only hear about it. Like, she comes home, the daughter's there in the house by herself, and she's like, "What's that about? Who left my possessed daughter here all by herself?" Basically, who thought that was a good idea? And then you find out, no, she wasn't by herself. She was with Bruce. Bruce was there, kind of keeping an ear open for her. Burke, and then he's found dead. In the book, there's this whole scene where the police investigator goes to the morgue and sees the body and describes how his head is turned all the way around. But in the movie, he tells the story about it. Right.
Yeah, and there's much more backstory about her, what it's like to be on the set, and these people that show up at the party, because the party's a big deal, because, this is around when Reagan's getting sick, and she's having this party. So it's all these different characters come in, and she's friends with everybody. She's like a super famous person. That's what you're supposed to understand. And she's very charismatic, and everybody wants to kind of party with Chris. They want to hang out with her. And so she has this hoi polloi party, and she has senators there and the priest there. That's like the showman. And Burke shows up, and Burke is a lousy drunk, by the way. Like, as soon as he gets a couple of drinks in him.
Oh, he's awful.
He's
yes.
terrible. He says awful, awful things. So that's funny. Like, when Sharon says, "Oh, I had Burke watch her because she had to run out and get medicine." Like, Sharon, what are you
you're
doing?
like, really? You couldn't call anybody else.
You literally couldn't wait, like, grab somebody off the street. You would have been better off.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway, so the book is basically follows exactly the storyline that the movie does. So the exorcist that comes in, then they go through the whole process of the exorcism, and the girl is yelling obscenities at them, and so on and so forth, and then at a certain point she kills the exorcist.
Yeah, she gives him a heart attack.
She gives him a heart attack, and it's funny because the book, like I said, I'm going to say 80% of the book is let's find out what's wrong with this little girl.
Yeah.
And pursuing all of those avenues. And so when they finally get to the end of the road and we have no other options but the exorcist, things move very fast. It's right at the very end of the book that all this stuff happens, the actual exorcism. So it happens really fast that he goes in, they describe the ritual of it. The exorcist dies, and then Father Karras says, it's a little bit different in the book than in the movie. In the book, he says something like, "Oh, why are you picking on weak children? Basically say, pick on somebody your own size and take me instead." And which the devil does, and then he jumps out the window and dies, or does he?
Or does he?
But that's basically, and that's how the movie goes too. But it is a very interesting book. I really did enjoy it, and it's a very fast read. And I don't know why, but I did not find it scary at all. I found it not scary.
I didn't find it scary. I just found it disturbing. And I found it like there's certain people like Burke Dennings I found to be very disturbing. And also you and I were both raised Catholic, so we have our own ideas about the church. I don't know how you feel. Like when I was a little kid and there were movies on TV like The Omen, like The Exorcist, and a priest was in jeopardy, I freaked out because I didn't think that could happen. How can you hurt a priest? They're God's son, right? And so it was hard for me, like at the time when I was younger watching this. As I get older, I find it very interesting, and the rituals that are involved and how much the church takes care of their people. I was really impressed with how he used it, because William Peter Blatty, by the way, was a devout Catholic. And throughout his whole life, and in fact went to Georgetown, and then he got very upset how progressive they became, that they preached things about like pro-choice and things like that, and he stopped giving them money towards the last few years of his life. He didn't think he was writing a horror novel. He thought he was writing a novel about faith and what that means, which is, I think, what he did.
Yeah, you could definitely look at it from that angle for sure. Yeah, it is really interesting. And also too, like I don't know, because you're Irish Catholic, I'm Mexican Catholic, and they're a little different. They're a little bit different. And I'm a little bit, certainly my Catholic school education was pure Irish. Everybody was Irish. Everybody in charge was Irish. But in the Mexican Catholic tradition, and I don't know how much of this is affected by the indigenous culture that it was kind of superimposed on or whatever, but the devil is just like a matter of fact thing that you talk about.
Yeah. Like,
oh yeah. When I was a kid, I remember people, like kids, other children in the neighborhood had all these stories about like, oh, I had a cousin and she was home alone and there was a knock at the door and she looked out the window to see who it was, and it was the devil, and she stayed frozen at that window for 3 years.
Oh wow, really?
Or, just these crazy stories, like my babysitter was home alone and the phone rang and it was the devil, and she picked it up and her hair turned white.
Oh, I've heard that one.
Crazy bananas things about, but it was just like an everyday thing that you kind of had to look out for, just kind of be on the lookout.
Yeah.
He's always around apparently, just waiting to do something. So it wasn't like, it wasn't so foreign. It wasn't like so woo, and certainly talks about people being possessed and all that kind. It was not unusual, oddly. So it's a little. So I guess it must be that reason that I was just so not freaked out by this movie in the least.
Well, should we start talking about the movie?
Yeah, let's talk about the movie. So 1973. So not that long after the book.
Right.
It's a massive hit.
Yeah.
And we're going to do the movie.
Yeah. So let me play the trailer.
And am I Yes, let's do the trailer. So this is the trailer for the original 1973 The Exorcist.
Somewhere between science and superstition, there is another world. The world of darkness. Nobody expected it.
Let's see what
Nobody believed it. And nothing could stop it.
There are no experts. You probably know as much about possession as most priests. Look, your daughter doesn't say she's a demon. She says she's the devil himself.
I'm telling you that thing upstairs isn't my daughter. Now, I want you to tell me that you know for a fact that there's nothing wrong with my daughter except in her mind. You tell me you know for a fact that an exorcism wouldn't do any good. You tell me that!
The one hope. The only hope. The Exorcist.
So when word got out about this movie going into production, there were a lot of people who wanted to be in it.
Marlon Brando supposedly wanted to be in it. A lot of people, I think Audrey Hepburn, they tried to get her to play Chris McNeil. There was a lot of people who wanted to be in it. So we should say William Friedkin is our director. And he had directed The French Connection, which had won the Oscar either the year before or the year before that. But it won Best Picture and Best Director. And he was hot stuff. He was whatever. And so William Peter Blatty definitely wanted to work with him. And they wanted to try to pair him up with actually a few other different directors. And there's all the names being bandied about. I think Stacy Keach was hired at one point to play Father Karras. Like, it would have been very, very different movie. But
yes, I heard also that they considered Jack Nicholson.
Yeah. Everybody was considered. Every little girl that was around that age was interviewed. I think Carrie Fisher, when I was up for the part for Reagan, everybody was up for these different parts. And actually, Ellen Burstyn was one of those people. She was in, I believe, was it the Last Picture Show that she was in? That it was just before this. No, Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore.
No, Alice, that's the one I was thinking of. Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. She was and is a humongous star. So she was not only a star of monster hits right around this time, like Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. She also was in the Last Picture Show. There's another one that I'm thinking of that she was in same time next year.
Yes,
which is right after The Exorcist, and she was also a major, or is, I should say, is still a huge stage star.
Yep.
So not just, what I'm trying to say is not just pretty face movie star. Like, she was already at this point had a reputation for being like an actor of serious clout, serious talent. And she was basically and somebody who at that point in her career could be like, I'm going to be playing this role now.
Yeah.
And that's just how it's going to be.
Well, she called him. Well, they wanted Anne Bancroft, and then Anne Bancroft was pregnant. So, and then they wanted Audrey Hepburn, and Audrey Hepburn said, sure, can you come to Rome? I'm like, no. And they had a few different women, because these studios always want like the big movie star, and she was more of an actress, like a serious actress. And William Friedkin, as soon as he met her, realized she was perfect. And then I love the story with Jason Miller, who plays our Father Karras. He was a playwright at the time, and he wrote a play called The Championship Season, and won all these awards. And every once in a while there's a big revival on Broadway, and it's a big sausage fest. It's a bunch of dudes, getting together from college, all that kind of stuff. But so he was in his 30s at the time, and he called William Friedkin and said, I'm the person you need for this job. You need to see me. And William Friedkin said, look, we hired Stacy Keach, but if you come out tomorrow, get on the plane, I'll talk to you. And he said to him, nope, I'm not meant to fly. I'm going to take a train. I'll see you in a week. And so a week later, he shows up, And then William Friedkin meets him, and he's like, "Oh my God, he's perfect. He is. He's a perfect choice for that part."
Yep. He is. He just, I don't know. Like, there's just so much going on in his face.
Yeah.
And his physicality is really impressive. Like, there's this scene in the movie where a couple of scenes where I'm just like, dang, he's not even saying anything. He's just standing there and he's like communicating. So like when he's standing on the subway platform, and the homeless guy asks him for money, and he just looks like 800 years old. He's just so tired.
And he's like 34, 35.
Yeah, he's pretty young.
Yeah.
And then the scene where he meets the detective. Oh, and how fabulous is Lee J. Cobb, by the way, the giant of the stage and screen. So he's working out, and Lee J. Cobb comes to meet him, and that too. So you also get that he's world weary. I can't imagine what kind of crap a priest psychiatrist hears.
Right.
Oh my God. And in that era, and all the stuff that we know that happened then, but also he is an athlete, so we also know that he has a lot of physical stamina, which comes into play later. It's a really fantastic performance.
He was kind of haunted by that performance. He had a hard time kind of letting it go, and then he was in the movie Rudy, which I always really loved. He plays the coach. Yeah, he died at 61 or 62 of sudden heart attack. Yeah, it's so there are a lot of. We should say this. Like, some people think the set was cursed, by the way, because there were 9 deaths related to people around the production. Not people who directly worked on the film, but like somebody's brother, somebody's wife, somebody's this person, or somebody got hurt there. There was a lot of like craziness. The set burned down at one point, the interiors, and they had to rebuild them. And there's this one scene, Margot, and when Reagan, in one of the scenes where she's like, not quite a CAT scan, but she's in that tube, and the guy is like...
Yeah, she's getting like an MRI kind of a thing, right?
So the tech that's talking to her was a real life tech. He did this for a living, and then he picked up acting gigs. You know, he'd play a doctor or whatever, you know, these acting gigs and stuff like that. Turns out, Margot, that guy is probably a serial killer. Yes, he was arrested for killing a very famous New York City movie theater critic. It was a series of gay killings, a gay man killing other gay men. It was crazy, and he went to jail for a long time. And I think he's out now, but they think he committed a bunch of crimes, but they can't prove it, kind of thing. But to me, that's where I get freaked out, because like, oh my God, that guy's a killer. If you Google it, you'll find it. But there's all kinds of wackiness. Like, there's a lot going around the film that I think maybe that's part of the reputation for it to being such a scary movie. Maybe. I mean, yeah. So I like the scenes. I love Ellen Burstyn as Chris, because she's like, I feel like she's like me. Like, we're very similar. Like, she doesn't like mansplaining. You know, she doesn't put up with crap. You know, she's a get her done kind of person. So I love how she's like keeping it together, because she's absolutely, for sure, terrified she's going to lose her daughter, and she and her daughter are incredibly close. They basically just have each other. The dad's not really in the picture, and she doesn't have other kids, and she doesn't have a boyfriend or anything. Like, their daughter is her whole world. So it really is horrifying for her to. You're a mother. You must, understand how that could feel.
Yeah. And the movie does such a great job. And I will say the book does too. There is a lot of this in the book, but the movie does an even better job, I'm sure, because it's Ellen Burstyn, of establishing how close Reagan and Chris are. They spend a lot of time showing us that relationship and the many sides of it and how deep it is, and the father being basically just a total deadbeat. So and one of the things I like about the book and the movie is the pacing of it. Mm-hmm. Like, it just, and that's one of the things that makes it so, if there's anything that makes it scary, it's that. It's not the girl's head spinning around. It's not like the projectile vomiting. It's the careful, measured pacing, because the movie is called The Exorcist. So at some point, like, stuff's gonna get really, really bad. So when they're at, when they're just kind of hanging out in the basement, and they're just kind of like all these little scenes that are sort of nothing scenes where nothing's happening. She's brushing her teeth, she's getting ready for bed, they're hanging out in the kitchen. Is so like fraught because that the movie's called The Exorcist. But the pacing of it is really, really cool. Like the first time, one of my favorite things about the movie, and I totally forgot about this, is the very first time, and it's way into the movie, a third in the movie, the very first time you hear the Exorcist theme. That piano, kind of thing. Yeah. And she's like just walking down the street, and she's watching some kids or something, right? She sees some kind of like local kids goofing off in the street or something like that, which is a perfectly benign thing that happens every day. But there's this like, oh crap, something really bad's going to happen to this woman. And the fact that she's a movie star and she has money and she has power, even in 1971, is not going to stop it. It's just going to happen to her. So I really love the way that and the book is like that too. I really love the way that the story is paced. It could seem very slow, but the slowness of it builds the suspense and builds the terror element of it, I think, a lot.
Yeah, there's a scene in the book that's not in the movie, but there is a Carl who's Swiss, and she asks them to leave the traps in the attic. And he's like, there's no mice here. There's no mice here. And she goes up to the attic, and then he kind of is like, see, I told you there's no mice. In the book, she actually takes a big Mickey Mouse doll and puts it in the trap and then sends him up there to get it, just to kind of goof on him because she felt like he was goofing on her.
Yeah.
For the mice. I mean, there's little elements like that you don't quite get, but it's like you said, it's part of the pacing. It's part of like what's going on. And so there's several trips to the hospital. She meets with several experts on several occasions, and she's trying to hold it together, but people aren't giving her a straight answer because they're flummoxed. They don't even know what's going on.
Well, it's a symptom of a type of disturbance in the chemical electrical activity of the brain. Case of your daughter in the temporal lobe. It's up here in the lateral part of the brain. Mm-hmm. It's rare, but it does cause bizarre hallucinations, and usually just before a convulsion.
A convulsion?
The shaking of the bed. That's doubtless due to muscular spasms.
Oh, no, that was no spasm. Look, I got on the bed. The whole bed was thumping and rising off the floor and shaking, the whole thing, with me on it.
Mrs. McNeil, the problem with your daughter is not her bed. It's her brain.
So I can't imagine
how
scared she was.
It is really interesting.
Yeah.
No, it's really scary. And you get more and more terrified for her because it's like, well, crap, what would you do?
Right.
What on earth would you do? And so in desperation, she finally decides to get in touch with an exorcist. And I have to say, and it's a little bit different in the book than it is in the movie. I adore the way they did it in the movie because here she is. She's supposed to be, I think she's supposed to be like a Meryl Streep, I mean, what other actress of that caliber can we talk? Would we be talking about? I think Meryl Streep is a good example. And so she's arranged to meet Father Karras for the first time, although she sort of knows who he is, and she's supposed to be like quote unquote in disguise, and she couldn't look more like a movie star trying to look incognito, like with the huge the wraparound coat with the big collar that's turned up, and the huge Jackie O sunglasses, and the Audrey Hepburn headscarf. It is hilarious. And she's supposed to be like, nobody's supposed to know who she is.
Right.
she totally stands out. Is very funny. I don't know if that's on purpose or not, but I thought it was hilarious.
She looks great. I have to say.
She looks amazing.
I think she's so beautiful.
I love her work.
Yes.
She's great.
Yeah.
But so she meets with him, and anyway, it's a great movie. It is a really well done movie. The music is what movie were we talking? Oh, Frankenstein.
Speaking of great movies.
Frankenstein, which we hated. And one of the things that we hated about Frankenstein is how they used the music in that movie.
Right.
Remember? Oh, it was horrendous. They just clobbered you over the head from start to finish with the music. And in this movie, the music is very, very sparingly used. Although I read somewhere that the director hated the music.
Oh, really?
The music is by Lalo Schifrin, who is, you know, his work. Let me see. I'm just going to try to find. I think he did a lot of very famous movie themes. He did the Mission Impossible. That's him. And Dirty Harry, and he's really very talented, and so he was the one who came up with that. I actually saw a concert of his when I was a kid.
Oh, really?
He was like guest conducting the symphony or something, and my parents took me. And among the things, he went through all of the various movie themes that he had done. I remember, and he played The Exorcist, and he played Mission Impossible, and which is really cool to see live. But yeah, the Friedkin, the director, hated it, like broke in, made the orchestra stop playing, hated it.
Wow.
And so a lot of the music that Schifrin wrote for the movie was completely thrown out. But the way that the music is used in the movie is so good. Like I said, you get sound effects, like you were talking about, that reverb stuff that happens.
Yep.
But the theme, the Exorcist theme, you don't hear until like stuff is already happening. Stuff is already going wrong for Chris.
It's called Tubular Bells. That's the
Tubular Bells.
And that's the first. It's a first big hit, believe it or not, for Richard Branson's Virgin Records. That was like the Tubular Bells. But it works.
That's fun.
But he uses and it's wonderful, and he uses it sparingly. You know, sometimes it's very, very. I hate it when the music soundtrack is just beating you over the head with the sound. Like it's almost as loud as the actors, or even louder. This is like sometimes it's just very, very soft, but you're just sort of like, okay, pay attention, something's going down.
Yeah, and it heightens it too. That like, and I remember thinking this at the time. You know that it again. I'm sure it's just to build the suspense, but like all of these nothing scenes where they're in the kitchen talking, she's getting her correspondence from her secretary, she's hanging out in the basement with Reagan before anything, you know, has started to go wrong. They're just hanging out. There's never a radio on. There's never like a record player playing. There's no sound except for you know, the people talking. And so that silence is so eerie. It's really eerie. Because there would be stuff going on in the background. You know, there's always something happening. There's always other noise happening, but not in this house, not in this world. And so, yeah. So when the music comes on and when you hear the demonic voice and all of that, it's so startling and jarring. It's great. It's so great the way they handle all that.
So we should say that Max von Sydow is our father Marin. And he was actually 44 years old at the time, and they had because he needed to be an older actor, but they needed an actor that could handle the pressure because William Friedkin kept that set freezing for The Exorcist. He kept it in the 30s. People were poor Linda Blair was wearing like a little nightgown, and she was not. She says to this day she hates cold, which I can imagine. So it took 3 hours to make Max von Sydow look like he's in his 80s. So he's a 44-year-old man. So I love his scenes with Father Karras. I love him and the two of them together. It's just such an interesting combination of expertise and backgrounds. And he's the first time he showed up. So there's a few people that help. Linda Blair gives, I feel, a wonderful performance. I mean, especially in the beginning, she really highlights her sweetness and how innocent that she is. So it is shocking so in the book and in the movie, there's the whole masturbating with the cross thing. Like all of that's from the book. All that vulgarity and stuff is directly lifted from the book. Now, she does a fantastic job, and she was nominated for an Oscar for her performance, but there was also help because Mercedes McCambridge, who was Orson Welles' favorite actress, she does the voice of the demon, and there's a woman, Eileen Dietz, who was her body double and did like little wacky, anything like a back shot and stuff like that. So the two of them both helped with that performance. And I love the Mercedes McCambridge is an incredible story. Like, she gave up drinking and smoking for a very long time. She was an alcoholic. And then as soon as she got this part, she says, bring me raw eggs. She was chain smoking and she drank whiskey like nonstop to get the voice of that growly demon voice. And so the big controversy is she supposedly said to William Friedkin, I don't want a big credit in the movie because I don't want anything to take away from Linda's performance. That's what she said. And I think she was also a little embarrassed about doing this part. And then like it got to be a big deal. And then she went to William Friedkin and said, damn it, where's my credit? I'm going to sue you if you don't give me credit. So
yes.
And it became a big stink in the press. And so some people think like it hurt Linda's chances because all of a sudden there was this controversy. But she is a character, I think, in the movie that's just as important as everybody else, her voice.
It is, absolutely. It is a masterful voice performance. Because first of all, even growly and grown up, it still sounds like it could be coming out of that body.
Yep.
Which is crazy. And I remember reading somewhere or other, and we forget that, this was not a very expansive genre at the time.
Right.
And so there were stories about the producers, visiting the set and going, are you people insane? Like, how could you possibly think this is a good idea? Like, there's no way in hell this is going to be a good movie. Like, I don't know what kind of crazy circus you're putting on here, but it's not going to, nobody's going to go see it. And so, yeah, I think you're right. I think she probably thought, oh gosh, well, I better not have my name on this thing.
Yeah. She was a Broadway actress. I'm sorry. Yeah, she was a big star. No. Yeah, in the radio and for the radio dramas of the time, she worked with Orson Welles, and then she had a big career on Broadway, and she had a lot of film work. But she was like a character actress. She was a big deal, and then she became a terrible alcoholic, and she gave up drinking. I think she became religious. She had a family, and then all of a sudden, this part just kind of came along, and I don't know how she found it, but that's like I said, she started drinking and smoking. She was actually bound to a chair at one point because she wanted to know what that felt like to give the performance. I mean, she went into it full
She wanted
tilt
in the
boogie.
Performance to and she scared everybody.
Yeah.
They were like, oh man, she is not kidding around here. And she should have gotten credit, Yeah. Give the woman credit, man. She was going all out. Balls to the wall, as they say.
Yes.
But I think maybe that was why. And you can imagine like what must have gone into. They're bringing a puppet of this girl, and the head turns all the way around. Like it had to have seemed really crazy.
When I was a kid, that freaked me out because I didn't expect it. Yeah, I watched it way too young. But as an adult, it's a lot less scary. It doesn't make sense.
Scary. Nah, it's just like a puppet. I don't know why. Apparently, that's like one of the major things about an exorcism is the head turning around thing. So,
I think it was also Burke's voice. I think because that's the thing where she turns her head around, then it's Burke's voice that say, "Do you know what your daughter did?" And it was, and that was creepy.
Yes. Yeah. So it's just a fantastic movie. Now, did they redo it?
There's been a few. So there were 2 sequels, and then there was a prequel or 2, and then there's a TV series out right now, which I haven't seen. But Gina Davis plays the older version of Reagan.
Oh,
yeah. I don't know if it's good or not, but it's out there.
Interesting. So and I remember that there were sequels done. There was at least one that had Linda Blair in it.
Yeah.
But I've only ever seen. This is the only one I've ever seen. I've never seen any of the sequels or anything like that. And so again, like the book, the movie was a mega hit.
So it made the budget was $12 million. it actually grossed $441 million. If you take in the video, like the video and DVD sales have been just incredible over the years. It's a perennial. Like every Halloween, this is on TV. Like people are watching it, and I think it's the highest grossing film ever for Warner Brothers if you adjust it for inflation.
Wow.
And there are pictures, and I'll put them in on Twitter. I'll show you guys, but there's just literally lines around the block for people to see this movie. Like everyone's freaked out, and people were. And we have to tell you this just to give you guys context. Like people were freaked out. The pre-scenes where they're doing when they're in the room and they're doing their incantations and stuff like that.
I cast you out, unclean spirit, Lord Jesus Christ. It is he who commands you. He who flung you from the heights of heaven to the depths of hell, from this creature of God. Gone! In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and the Holy Spirit, by this sign of the Holy Cross of our Lord Jesus Christ, who lives and reigns with the Father and the Holy Spirit. Damien!
People freaked out. People passed out. People got, one woman apparently miscarried while she was in the audience. There was a guy that went home and shot his wife. There's all kinds of crazy stories. But also the big thing is people getting sick.
Yes, that's what I remember is again, so this movie came out the year I was born. And so, I've only ever seen it on cable or, I never saw it in the movie theater. And that's what I remember is everybody talking about how people were puking in the aisles all over the place.
Yes. And speaking of that, it's like the one thing that everybody talks about, it's the pea soup scene. And Reagan, which is disgusting. And
it is. It's gross.
And poor Jason, so Jason Miller, he's like the hero of this movie, I think, quite honestly. I think if you didn't have him, it would really be missed. I don't think Stacy Keach could do what Jason Miller brought.
I agree.
And so there's the scene. So we have that. There's one scene where the scenes with his mother. Oh my God. In that horrible little apartment. Dimmy. Don't leave me, Dimmy. Oh, you just, breaks your heart. When there's one point where the phone rings and he looks really startled. And it's a big, one of the jump scares that they have. In real life, William Friedkin let off a shotgun, like a pistol, to get that reaction from him. And he was furious. He's like, dude, I'm an actor. Just tell me what reaction you want. And then when they did the pea soup scene where she's vomiting, they told him, it's going to aim right at your chest. So just, stand this way. And and they got right into his face.
Your mother's in here with his cars. Would you like to leave a message? I'll see that she gets it.
If that's true, then you must know my mother's maiden name. What is it? What is it?
Oh, see, that's not nice.
No,
you don't do that.
Friedkin is apparently at the time was he kind of abused his actors a bit. I mean, he was all about the movie. There's a great chase scene in The French Connection that takes place in New York, and they're going through Brooklyn, and they're following an elevated train. And Friedkin admits he had no permits for anything. He just told them, just drive fast. Just go really fast and try not to get arrested. And real people almost got killed. And he was just thrilled by it.
If you've ever seen that scene, it is dangerous.
Yeah.
Don't try that at home, kids. I just wanted one little side note about Mercedes McCambridge. I was trying to look up. I was like, what? I wanted to mention one of my favorite performances in the movies of all time is Mercedes McCambridge in Giant.
I haven't seen that movie in a long time. Who did she play?
She plays Luz. She plays Rock Hudson's sister, who doesn't like Elizabeth Taylor, and she's really the one that runs the ranch. It is such a great performance. So if you've ever seen Giant, she's the one who plays Luz, and that is the same woman who voiced the demon in The Exorcist.
Isn't that crazy?
I love her. So yeah, I was surprised how well it held up.
Yeah, it was entered into the National Film Registry of all things in 2010. And, people still, I think it's still done under the horror genre. That's where people put it. But I'm finding it more as the more I watch it, it's more of a drama, and it's more like a family drama. And it is about faith. It is.
And I love the end. The end of the movie is a little bit different than it is in the book. It's a happier ending, I guess, because kind of going off into the sunset, where in the book it's basically sort of the priest Father Karras dies, and it's kind of an abrupt end. Yeah. Which, by the way, I was already thinking watching the movie. So Burke, we assume the little girl kills Burke. The little girl is possessed, and somehow she pushes him out the window, is what we're led to believe.
Right.
And he falls down this very scary looking staircase, which is in Georgetown. You would think they would close that staircase, right?
Yeah.
Like, one person falls down the stairs and dies. We close the staircase, but then two people fall down the stairs and die, because then Father Karras jumps out the window and falls down the exact same staircase and dies at the bottom of the staircase. And then at the very end of the movie, you see Father Dyer, the showbiz father.
Yes.
He's just kind of walking by that staircase and looks up and is sort of sad. And I'm like, why is it still open?
I think it's open
why
now.
Is that people can still walk up and down. There's not even like crime scene tape. There's nothing.
So there's a scene where, there's some people think it's controversial what happens at the very, very end when the demon takes him, but Karras takes the demon and then willfully jumps out that window because he wants to end all this crap. It's not that the devil killed him. He's killing the devil. That's something you have to, So in Catholic faith, there's 7 sacraments. One of them is death. The sacrament of death.
Last rites.
Last rites, thank you. And so, he says to him, do you have any confession for me? That's a real thing that Catholics have. The scene there, William Friedkin's like, all right, go over and ask for the last rites. He goes, wait a second, to the father. And he's a real priest, by the way, in real life. He slaps him across the face and then shoves him into the scene, so that he's walking the scene all dazed and freaked out.
Yeah,
because shaken. Shaken because he just got clocked by the director. Like I told you, he could be kind of a bastard. This
William Friedkin.
I know. I don't think he would do it now. I'm going to say that he's a much older person and he's a much more sanguine person. He has a better attitude about stuff. He's making documentaries mostly now.
Well, it's a great movie. I really liked the movie, and I liked the book. Which did you like better?
I guess I'm going to give a slight to the movie just because I've seen it more, but I really, really enjoyed the book.
I really enjoyed the book too, and oddly, although the movie and the book are pretty tightly, they're pretty close in terms of how the story is told. I also give the edge to the movie because I think Linda Blair and Burstyn and Miller and Lee J. Cobb, I think they just bring so much to those characters, so much more than even is in the book. Max von Sydow is amazing.
He's so good.
He's really phenomenal. And I think I have to give a little bit of an edge to the movie, but if you love this movie and haven't read the book, read the book. You will love it. You'll love it.
It's a fast read too, like Margos said. It's like under 300 pages. I whipped through it really quickly, and especially the last third of that book just flies by.
It's so fast.
It's a page turner.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. So next,
yes.
so that was our first holiday movie. I tried to, and the funny, I was watching the movie, and I'm telling you, I was desperately looking for some kind of a holiday tie-in but I didn't find one. Except Jesus, I guess. Maybe.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
There's a priest. There are a lot of priests. There's holy water.
But there's holy water. Yeah. So it's a reach, but that's the best we can do. But next we are generally doing a holiday movie. We are doing A Christmas Carol.
Yes. And I am so excited, Margot. I am kind of a Christmas Carol freak. I love those movies very much. I think I've seen just about every iteration that's been out there, including A Diva's Christmas Carol, which is one of my favorites.
Oh, the one with Vanessa Williams.
Yes. I love that movie. I own it on DVD. So, I mean, so we have to just figure out which one we're going to use, because the one I really, really love is with Patrick Stewart, and you and I were talking back and forth, and I think there's a free version on YouTube. On Amazon, you have to pay for like the film. It's like $10 or something. I know. And then there's the Jim Carrey one.
YouTube is kind of cruddy.
Which one?
Quality. The quality of the Patrick Stewart one on YouTube is not that.
Yeah, it's not good. So there's a Jim Carrey one that came out a few years ago. So I thought maybe it's rentable, and it's animated, I believe. So I thought that could be kind of interesting. We did Jim Carrey last year. You know, why not?
There is, of course, the classic Susan Lucci TV.
Where she was Scrooge?
She's Scrooge.
Yes, I've seen a lot of these things. I've seen there's one called American Christmas Carol with Henry Winkler, and that's from the 70s. I own that one too. I'm a big fan of this story. I like the movie Scrooged. Yeah.
I love Scrooged. But let's go ahead and do Jim Carrey.
Good. I haven't seen that one. So yeah, okay. So it's a deal. So we'll be back in a couple of weeks. So we forgot to mention, this is Book versus Movie, the podcast that talks about films that are adapted from books, and you can find us wherever you find your podcasts, including Spotify now. How exciting is that? It's Book vs. Movie Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. And please, if you like what you hear, please subscribe. You'll never miss an episode. And if you love what you hear, and especially in Apple Podcasts /iTunes, if you can leave a review for us, we need a few more reviews. That would be pretty amazing. We'd really love that. And we read all the 4- and 5-star reviews on the air. So you can even just write gibberish and we'll read it. So we would love that. And so, Margot, where can they find you?
You can find me online at thechingonahomesteader.com, and all of my social media is at She's Nacho Mama, SHESNACHOMAMA. My other podcasts are Did I Just Eat That Out Loud and Resisting Bitch Face.
And this is Margot D, and you can find me wherever on social media with Brooklyn Fit Chick, and that's on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. My blog is called brooklynfitchick.com, and my other podcasts are Not Fade Away, the Fit Bottom Girls podcast, and the Best Neighbors podcast. And thank you guys so much. This has been fun. Thank you so much for listening to the Book versus Movie podcast. We are a part of the Frolic Podcast Network. You can find more podcasts you will love at frolic.media/podcasts. We follow the hashtags LadyPodSquad and Podern Family. If you want to support the show, you can go to our Patreon page, go to Patreon, and look for Book versus Movie Podcast. We have a basic Facebook page, but we also have a private Facebook group. Go to Facebook and type in Book vs. Movie Podcast group if you want to join that. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Book versus Movie. Spell all those words out. If you'd like to send us an email, it's Book versus Movie Podcast, spell that all out, at gmail.com. You can follow Margot D at Brooklyn Fit Chick on social media, and Margot P at She's Nacho Mama. Thanks so much again for checking out our show, and we'll be back soon with a new episode.